Maria Delgado was 3 weeks from retirement when her phone rang and a stranger emptied her entire life savings without ever touching her wallet. This is Officer David Chen, Social Security Administration, Office of Fraud Investigation. Calm. Official. A little bored, even. Like he'd made this call 1,000 times, and this was just another Tuesday. He wasn't lying about that part. Your Social Security number has been linked to a vehicle abandoned in Laredo, Texas. 40 kilos of cocaine in the trunk, $2,000 in bloodstained cash. This is a federal matter, ma'am. I need to verify your identity has not been compromised. 31 years teaching second grade. Never so much as a parking ticket. And now a federal officer was telling her, calmly, that her name was tied to a drug trafficking case. What do I need to do? That's the only question that ever matters in a scam, and the second she asked it, she'd already lost. Over the next 6 hours, Maria drained $142,000, every dollar of her retirement, into Bitcoin, ATMs, and gift cards, on the instructions of a man who was never a cop, never a fraud investigator, and never for 1 second going to give any of it back. Here's the part that should actually scare you. Maria isn't unusually gullible. She's not stupid. She's not naive. She's not the type. Run the same script on you on the exact day you're distracted, exhausted, and scared for someone you love. And the math says you fold too. That's not an insult. That's the entire business model. Because what got stolen from Maria was never really $142,000. That number is just the receipt printed at the end of the transaction. What was actually bought and sold in real time over 6 hours was her judgment, rented off her at gunpoint, made of words, and never given back until the account hit zero. Every scam on earth, no matter what costume it's wearing, runs the exact same 3-step engine. Find what you're terrified to lose, collapse the time you have to think about it, and hand you exactly one exit, the one they built for you to walk through. Once you can see that engine, you cannot unsee it, and by the end of this video, you're going to see it everywhere. Here's a number that should make your stomach drop. Americans reported losing over $10 billion to fraud in a single recent year, and that's just the fraction that got reported. Add in the shame, the embarrassment, the sheer disbelief that stops most victims from ever picking up the phone to file a complaint, and the real number is almost certainly double that. This isn't a handful of unlucky people. This is a functioning global industry with better unit economics than most legitimate businesses you've ever worked for. And it's not slowing down, it's scaling. Because for the first time in history, the tools required to run this exact playbook, the fake caller ID, the cloned voice, the script optimized across millions of calls for maximum panic, are getting cheaper and more convincing every single year. What took a skilled con artist a lifetime to learn, a mediocre one can now run off a laptop with software doing half the emotional labor for him. So, stay with me. Because the next 3 stories aren't here to scare you for the sake of it. They're here to show you exactly where the seams are. The moments in each con where, if you know what to look for, the entire structure collapses. Frank Whitaker was 78 and had answered his phone the same way for 50 years. Whitaker Residence. This time a young voice crying, "Grandpa? Grandpa, it's me." Frank didn't recognize the voice. Bad connection, the kid was clearly panicking. And honestly, at 78, matching voices on a bad phone line wasn't Frank's strong suit anymore. So he did what any grandfather on earth would do. "Bobby? That you, son?" And there it was. The scammer never said a name, didn't need to. Frank had just handed it over himself free of charge. The single most valuable line in the entire script, and Frank wrote it for them. "Grandpa, please don't tell Mom and Dad. I'm in Mexico. I got in an accident, and there's a lawyer here, and he says if I don't pay right now, I'm going to jail. Please, Grandpa, I'm so scared." A second voice took over. Older. Fluent English, zero accent, introduced himself as Attorney Rodriguez, here to help Bobby quietly, before this had to become an official police matter. Look at the architecture, same bones as Maria's call, different costume. An authority figure, a ticking clock. and one line that matters more than every other word combined: don't tell mom and dad. That sentence is not a throwaway. It is the load-bearing wall of the entire operation, because the second Frank picks up a second phone and calls his daughter to ask, "Is Bobby actually in Mexico?" the whole thing falls apart in 4 seconds flat. Isolation isn't a side effect of the scam. Isolation is the product, wrapped up and sold to Frank as a favor to his own grandson. Frank wired $9,000 that afternoon, $6,000 more 2 days later when medical costs came up. Bobby, the entire time, was in his dorm room at Penn State, 3 states away, wondering why his grandfather had gone quiet. What's being priced here is almost beautiful in how cruel it is. Scammers are putting a number on the exact value of a grandparent's love versus their capacity for doubt, and betting correctly at scale across millions of phone calls a year that love wins almost every single time. Frank didn't need to fully believe the story. He just needed to believe it was possible, and that being wrong about ignoring it was a risk he could not survive. Small cost to comply, catastrophic cost to be wrong. That asymmetry is the whole business, and it works on smart people just as easily as anyone else. Maybe even more easily, because smart people trust their own judgment the most, right up until the moment someone weaponizes their love for a grandchild against it. Frank spent 50 years running his own accounting firm. He caught fraud for a living. None of that mattered in the 4 minutes it took to convince him his grandson was sitting in a Mexican jail cell. And here's the twist inside the twist. Elderly victims report crimes like this far less than younger victims, not because it hurts less, because shame is heavier than the loss itself. The fear that your own kids will decide you can't be trusted with your own bank account anymore. So the scam doesn't just take the money. It sells you your own silence as a free bonus, gift wrapped inside the original theft. Here's what nobody puts in the headline. Running a scam is not free. It has overhead, it has quotas, it has a boss. And once you understand the economics on the other side of that phone call, this stops being a crime story and turns into something closer to a horror movie. These operations, the ones targeting Frank and Maria, are rarely lone wolves in a basement. They are industrial. Entire compounds, office park-sized buildings, many in Southeast Asia, running scripted calls in 12-hour shifts with managers, targets, and spreadsheets tracking who's behind quota. And a sickening number of the voices on those calls belong to trafficking victims, lured across borders with fake customer service job postings, passports confiscated the moment they land, told flatly they'll be beaten or sold to another compound if they don't hit the day's number. So follow Frank's $15,000 all the way down the chain. A slice becomes profit for an organized crime syndicate that will never see a courtroom. A slice pays the electricity bill on a building full of forced labor. And a slice, this is the part that should genuinely unsettle you, goes toward literally holding another human being hostage, forcing him to extract money from strangers to avoid a beating that night. Frank lost his retirement. The 23-year-old reading the script off a laminated sheet lost his passport, his freedom, and possibly his life if he stops producing. Almost nobody inside that transaction wins. The only person who wins is sitting 3 tiers above both of them untouched. This is why you cannot arrest your way out of this problem. Cuff one caller, and the compound plugs a new trafficked worker into that chair by morning. You are not fighting a criminal. You are fighting a factory that manufactures criminals out of victims continuously at scale. And here's the detail that turns your stomach the second time. These compounds don't just train workers on a script, they run performance reviews. Workers who bring in the most money get moved to nicer dorms, sometimes even get a cut of the take. Workers who fall behind quota get their food rationed, or worse. It is a management structure copied, almost beat for beat, from a call center, just with human trafficking sitting underneath the org chart instead of a benefits package. Governments have started raiding these compounds in the last few years, freeing thousands of trafficked workers at a time. And almost every raid reveals the same thing. Warehouses of confiscated passports, whiteboards with daily quotas written in marker, and workers who, when finally freed, don't know how to get home because the traffickers control their money, their documents, and their entire world. Keep that in your head. Because the next case flips the entire model upside down. Same target, same industry, completely different weapon. Denise Okafor met Michael Turner on a dating app 11 months before she ever heard the word scam applied to her own life. Michael's profile, structural engineer, working an oil rig off the coast of Scotland. Widower. One daughter back in Texas with her grandmother, kind eyes in every photo, sometimes in a hard hat, once holding up a fish he'd apparently caught. For 4 months, Michael asked Denise for exactly $0. That's the detail people miss about romance scams. The professionals never rush. This isn't a smash and grab. It's a long-term investment with a payback period, and like any serious investment, it front-loads the cost with something that feels priceless: attention. Good morning texts, every day without fail, a call every night. He remembered her sister's name. He remembered her arthritis flaring up in cold weather. He sent her a poem on their 2-month anniversary that made her cry at her own kitchen table. In every measurable way except physically standing in the room, he was the most attentive partner she'd had in a decade. By month 5, his rig equipment got seized by customs over a paperwork error. $4,000, urgently, or his whole crew loses the shift. Denise didn't hesitate. He'd pay her back the second he had Wi-Fi on solid ground, he told her, mortified to even have to ask. She sent it. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. The moment Denise sent that first $4,000, something shifted in her that had nothing to do with Michael at all. Psychologists call it the sunk cost trap, but on the ground it feels nothing like a textbook term. It feels like loyalty, like proof. Denise had already told her sister about Michael, already imagined him meeting her kids. Walking away now wouldn't just mean losing $4,000. It would mean admitting out loud that she'd been wrong about him and wrong about her own judgment. So when the next request came, saying no felt more expensive than saying yes, then a medical emergency for his daughter, then a customs bribe, then a flight home that fell through and needed rebooking twice. Over the next 7 months, Denise sent Michael $187,000, her late husband's life insurance, her home equity line, a personal loan taken out specifically, in her own words, to help him get home to me. Michael never got on a plane. Michael, as far as investigators can prove, never existed at all. The photos belong to a real engineer living in Aberdeen who had no idea his face was courting a widow 4,000 miles away. Flip Maria's math upside down and you get Denise. The fake federal agent extracted $142,000 in 6 hours through raw panic. Michael extracted $187,000 across 7 months through patient, deliberate, emotional investment. Denise wasn't buying protection from a threat. She was buying companionship. And every single dollar she sent felt to her like love, not loss. That is the real horror of the long con. The victim isn't fooled into thinking it isn't a scam. She's convinced it isn't a transaction at all. Romance scam losses in America now top $1 billion a year. Not because they're the most common scam, but because the average loss per victim dwarfs almost every other category. Patience is expensive to run. It pays out on a completely different scale than panic ever will. Zoom all the way out, and the economics of getting scammed stop being about 3 unlucky individuals and start looking like a tax, an invisible, unregulated tax levied on human trust itself. Every scam that succeeds doesn't just cost the victim their money. It costs the rest of us a sliver of our willingness to answer a number we don't recognize, to believe a stranger's kindness is real, to help a panicked grandchild without quietly opening a second line to check the story first. That's the cost nobody prices in. Scam compounds don't just extract dollars from Frank, Denise, and Maria. They extract a small piece of collective trust from everyone who hears their story afterward and thinks, just for a second, I need to be more suspicious of every single person from now on. Multiply that by every viewer watching this video, every family member who now double-checks a grandkid call, every widow who now waits 3 extra months before believing a stranger online. And you start to see the actual scale of the damage. It isn't measured in dollars stolen. It's measured in warmth withdrawn from a species that used to extend it freely. And the market keeps growing precisely because the math works. Global fraud losses are now estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year, bigger than the GDP of entire countries. While conviction rates stay low, jurisdiction is a nightmare across borders, and the workforce, trafficked and disposable, gets replaced the moment any of it gets caught. It might be the only criminal industry in human history where the core raw material, trust, regenerates itself for free, no matter how many times you rip it out. Maria never got her retirement back. Frank's daughter manages his accounts now, a decision that broke something in both of them. Denise still checks her phone most mornings, an old habit that hasn't quite let go of a man who was never real. The economics of getting scammed at the end of the day is the economics of the fastest, cheapest lie ever sold to a human being, that someone somewhere urgently needs your help right now. And hesitating for even 1 second will cost you more than paying up ever could. It is the only product on the planet engineered to be worth exactly nothing, sold to you at the precise moment you are least equipped to check the receipt. So, next time your phone rings and your gut says something's off, trust the gut. Hang up. Call them back on a number you already know. Text the grandchild directly instead of trusting the voice on the line. Ask the federal agent for a badge number and tell him you'll call the department directly to confirm it. Watch how fast a real emergency tolerates that and how fast a fake one doesn't. Because the one thing every scammer on earth is counting on every single time in every single script is that you won't give yourself the 10 seconds it takes to check. Don't give them those 10 seconds. That's the only receipt that actually protects you. And it's the one thing on this entire ledger that costs you nothing at all.